Good evening, everybody. This is Silverbusters coming at you with another video. And today's topic is about cryptocurrency and more about reserve currency status and the historical setup where reserve currency status is never surrendered. It is always taken. And so I just want to reach out to people in the crypto community, people who have made profits in cryptos, and now they're Bitcoin billionaires or, trading in a variety of different altcoins, and they've seen this massive run up. They've seen their capital increase. And yet we really haven't seen a fundamental shift in the Western financial system, right? Or the global financial system, if you want to put it that way. Now, you are big dog if you're in cryptos, if you're in places like Nigeria or Venezuela, where the local government is so inept and so corrupt that Bitcoin and other cryptos basically fly in to fill the power vacuum, right? So that's the only real place where fundamental reform is taking place, where a sounder currency system is taking over, because the local authorities are just too inept to keep their local systems going. And they even try to ban Bitcoin or to ban the local black markets and various things. And there's a slapback by the populace, and they're not able to enforce it, and they have to eventually adopt whatever alternative means and abandon their central banking plans that they have, because they just can't keep their shit together, basically, is what it amounts to. But if you're in the United States, if you're in Europe, if you're in Canada, Australia, New Zealand, China, Japan, East Asia, India, cryptos have a presence, but they are still a minuscule presence compared to the powers that be, the mainstream financial systems. Yes, they are growing. Yes, they are making inroads. But at the same time, the period of time when they were making those inroads, they weren't viewed as any sort of threat to the existing structure of the financial system. So they were basically allowed to get to this point by the big bankers, the central bankers, the central planners, the governments of the world. They haven't really brought down the regulation ban hammer in the West to try to tamp down any competition. But that may not always be the case, right? We've already got people from various central banks, from various governments, talking about the need for regulation. The various regulation groups, they don't have time to investigate spoofing in the silver market. When they do find something that's amiss, they hand out a paltry fine that's less than the amount of money they're making on the corrupt trades, and they just write it off as a cost of doing business, and the corrupt system keeps on going right on down the road, right? So now they're weaponizing the regulatory bodies. They're going after the little guys. Oh, it must be some YouTubers influencing Robinhood traders on Reddit accounts. Somehow this mob of little guys is the threat compared to these big corrupt banks and the things we know they're doing, spoofing the market, rehypothecating things like gold and silver, suppressing prices, and such means in order to cover up their schemes. Essentially, if you're looking at the overall economy, the global economy, if we break it down into the U.S., and then most of the world emulates the U.S. on some level, or they're so linked to it that their system lives or dies with it. The Federal Reserve is in a sort of box, right? There is absolutely no appetite for any kind of tax increases in the United States. And I saw it this morning. It may be on here if I keep scrolling down, it was on Zero Hedge this morning. Let's keep going and see if it's on here. Da 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 da. Yeah, not a lot of enthusiasm for that. GOP and moderate Dems oppose Biden tax hikes. So this was a big headline that was on Zero Hedge this morning. And it just goes to show you that even when the party changes, even when some new government force comes in, there's absolutely no appetite for higher tax rates from either major party in the United States, right? So that means that the funding mechanism, whether we're talking about Trump populists or left-wing Green New Deal type of investment, all of that money is going to come from the Federal Reserve in the form of bond buying, which is quantitative easing, which is money printing, right? It's just inflating the supply of currency of the system. And that puts weight on the currency. It puts weight on the US dollar as legitimacy, the dollar's legitimacy, because unless those funds actually make it into the productive economy and we see more commodity production, more housing production, more efficient industry, better infrastructure and transportation systems and all of these things, when those dollars don't make a straight transfer over into the productive economy, what we just see is these runs in financial assets, right? It's a part of why Bitcoin is as high as it is right now. It's a part of the reason why the stock market is as high as it is right now, because there's all this easy money, and eventually some of it finds its way into the financial markets when we're hoping it would end up in the real economy, and it doesn't, right? So the Federal Reserve is in this box. Either it has to keep monetizing all of this debt that the government is forcing upon it, and it's the debt that they're forcing upon it is ever decreasing in the amount of potency it has in terms of its return in the real economy. The percentage of it that ends up improving our daily lives in some meaningful way in terms of materially making our lives better is decreasing, and the amount of it that is just running into casino bets in various financial markets is increasing. And all you have to do is look at what people are doing with their $1,400 stimulus checks. Some people may be using it to make wise investments in their lifestyle and pay down debts, but most of it is ending up in the market or ending up in some kind of other investment, because despite what the market what some people want to say, not everybody is desperate. A lot of people have been working the whole time, and so you hand those people $1,400. They might spend some of it, but a lot of them are just going to reinvest it in something else. And a lot of those people are just going to dump it into an IRA, into some kind of passive investment fund that's just going to buy S&P 500 index funds or something like that, and be slow money and dumb money to push the overall level of the markets up, right? So to get back to the box that the Fed is in, they can't keep doing that forever, or they're going to destroy the currency, right? But if they don't buy the bonds that the government issues, interest rates are going to go up, right? We saw that spike in interest rates. I forget if it was 7 years or whatever, but it also showed itself in the 10-year Treasury. That's the interest rate that the government is paying for borrowed money, right? And that spiked up. And then the Federal Reserve had to go, oh no, we've got everything under control. We're going to buy more bonds, even though they're buying, I forget if it was 120 billion a month in QE, just automatically every month. So that spigot, that money printing spigot, has become standard issue, right? And they're constantly watching and jawboning the market, saying, "Oh yeah, if we see these interest rates spike at all, we're going to step in." And the reason why they have to step in is because there's some real key levels here. We've got the recognized debt that's approaching $30 trillion, right? And that's not really keeping up with all of the new stuff that's being passed. It was right when Trump came in, it was $20 trillion. As Trump was going out, it was approximately $28 trillion, which is the same trend line, about 9% increase per year. Basically, if you're in for 2 full terms, you're pretty much guaranteed to double the national debt under your terms. And that happens whether you're a Republican or a Democrat, right? It doesn't really matter. That's the way the system is structured. The money is getting spent, and it's at the cost of the underlying currency, the purchasing power, the value of the underlying currency. And a lot of this is in the form of dry powder being held by the banks as excess reserves, but that's not a situation that's going to stay that way forever, right? This is money that will eventually find its way into the markets, and we've seen that recently with a spike in commodity prices. We've seen oil up big. This time last year, I saw 99 cents a gallon. You were doing 149, 129 for a gallon of gasoline in my area, and now we're talking 250, and that's a big chunk out of people's daily budgets when they have to spend, roughly twice as much on gasoline because the oil price is going up. If you look at wheat or soybeans or copper, these kind of prices are going up. So the Fed is still continuously having to watch this, because if they let these interest rates, if they don't step in, if they don't step in, then interest rates will rise, and then the amount of interest the government has to pay on its debts will be so colossal that it actually will bring in less income in the form of taxes than the interest on the national debt costs, right? And at that point, I don't think there's any sane person on the planet who would think that the government was legitimate, right? Because if you can't bring in enough money to pay the minimum on your credit cards, you need to declare bankruptcy, because there's no coming back from that situation, right? And as this article shows right here, no one is Democrats or Republicans. They don't want to pass tax hikes, and that's just not on the table. And even if the government did collect those taxes, what kind of adverse effect is that going to have on the economy if they start funneling a bunch of money into the corrupt halls of the government out of the productive, the private sector, right? That's not necessarily going to help anything. So that's sort of the box they're in, right? They can't let rates spike. And they can't, and if they keep monetizing the debt, eventually the currency is going to fall out from under them, right? And so that's the situation that they're in. But as I mentioned before, there's this decrepit system that is trapped in this box, but it's still wielding authority. It's still a threat to people that are investing in cryptocurrencies. It's still a threat to people investing in hard assets. They still have the veneer of respectability, the veneer of power, the outer shell of the rule of law is still there. So it's still a big risk to put a bunch of money into cryptos and try to establish the new next best thing. This is not a Nigeria or a Venezuela we're going up against that is comically inept. This is, the New World Order. This is the Western global civilization that we're going at. And while it is greatly weakened while it is kind of corrupt and decrepit in various ways, that doesn't mean in its death throes it can't lash out at you and do some incredible damage to you because of the situation that you're in. If you're the first adopter, if you're the one who sticks your head up and say, you know what, I'm going to trade on Bitcoin and I'm not going to declare capital gains because it's just inflation and it's not Bitcoin going up, it's the dollar going down, and I'm not going to pay taxes on that. Well, if the government comes and sends a SWAT team to your house and bonks you on the head and you're dead, it doesn't really help you any that you were really good at getting in early into cryptocurrencies, does it? Right? They still have that veneer of respectability and that amount of authority because the last vestiges of the dollar system is still supporting up this power structure. So in order for us to reach a new decentralized economy where we don't have this threat of central bankers being able to steal our purchasing power out from under us at any given time or try to regulate us out of existence in the form of cryptocurrencies, we need to break the power of the old system. And yes, you can try to wait around and hide and see if it will happen on its own, and maybe you'll make it in that kind of scenario or maybe not, because if we leave these guys around long enough, they may just pass various onerous regulations. Best case scenario, you have to go underground with your capital and you can't do anything with it meaningful in the economy until some kind of a better system emerges on the other side. And worst case scenario, the regulations come down on you. They actively pursue people. They take down exchanges or heavily restrict what exchanges will do for you. And they just make a whole mess of the system and ruin a lot of people who are early adopters of this system using the last vestiges of their power. And I still don't see them winning in the long run, but in that kind of scenario, I see the casualties on the side of the decentralizers, the new adopters, in terms of some sort of new crypto system that's much fairer and doesn't allow for rampant inflation to exist. It's just a harder road to go down than the one I'm about to propose to you. The one I'm about to propose to you is we have to do something to break the reserve currency status of the US dollar. Because as I mentioned at the start of this little conversation, the reserve currency status is never surrendered. It is always taken, right? And there's always something that forces the hand of the previous regime to hand over the reserve currency status to whatever new and upcoming player there is, right? And so, the previous one was World War I, right? Prior to the war, Britain had a silver standard and a gold standard. They got into World War I. They spent tons of money, they had lost tons of men, and they ultimately fought what amounted to a fruitless battle. There was no real material gains for the British Empire and the First World War, right? They may have gotten some German colonies, but they weren't in any way going to pay for the cost of the war. And they printed a bunch of money to pay for their war expenses, and they had to drop their metallic standards, and they ultimately ended up surrendering the reserve currency status to the United States. And now it was a period that took over a period of time, but that's how it happened, right? And if we go back in history, there's always some kind of war, there's some kind of kick in the teeth that the old power gets that forces it to give up on their reserve currency status. It just makes it obvious to the world that its time in the sun is over, and people realize this and they start looking for new horizons in which to park their money and invest, and so on and so forth. So what is this proposed plan? Well, you need to do something to cripple the US dollar, and this is a silver channel. So guess what the proposition is? You need to take some of your winnings in crypto, some of these big gains that you've gotten, and shift them into physical silver. Not SLV, because they'll just rehypothecate and lie about the reserves they have on hand, and basically turn it into an unallocated silver account. You have to actually do the work, pull out the money, and go to an online dealer or go to a local coin shop and physically procure as much physical silver as you can, because silver is the Achilles heel of the financial markets. Whatever you do on the crypto side of things is not going to, it's basically a side game. It's not going to destabilize the current financial structure, because you're basically in a parallel system. You're not in a system that's integrated with the existing monetary system. You kind of exist outside of it in a sphere, and your sphere might expand or contract, but it's never going to overwhelm the current system, except in the cases of extreme incompetence, like we have in Venezuela and Nigeria and so on and so forth. And you can either wait for that moment, or you can do something to make it happen faster so the new system can come quicker, and that would be some kind of world based on honest money, a combination of hard asset backed currencies with some sort of crypto based transactional mediums. Some of them, maybe Bitcoin becomes the settlement mechanism for large national transfers or between big corporations, whereas there's going to be a smaller crypto probably for transactional things, and maybe that's backed with silver. There's several gold and silver backed cryptocurrencies, and on some level you'll have exchanges accepting physical for these various tokens. But to get to that system, you can't just park your money on the sidelines in cryptos. You have to interact in some way with the existing power structure, with the existing monetary system, in order to hasten its demise. And the Achilles heel of the system is silver, because when you look at the above ground stocks of gold and silver, there's only about as much gold. It's about a 1-to-1 ratio, even though the price ratio between gold and silver is hovering around something like 66-to-1. You can get 66 ounces of silver for the relative price of 1 ounce of gold. Despite that, what is actually available for investment purposes above ground is basically the same amount as gold. So if we were doing a basic supply and demand kind of calculation here, the supply is the same, right? You've got the same amount of silver and the same amount of gold. So it's a much smaller market. So whatever crypto money you use, and take whatever gains you have and reintegrate that into the system and pour it onto this weak point in the system, you are much more likely to get it to crack in the silver market than you are in some other market like the gold market or 10-year treasuries or something else that's just a much larger market that you're trying to deal with. Next, it's just they don't... We know that these systems, whether it's gold or silver, rely on rehypothecation. There's unallocated accounts. There's these kind of shadowy institutions like the SLV that say, hey, we've got all these sub-custodians, and if they do something bad, we're not liable. Ha ha ha, and so basically once you read what the prospectus actually says about a lot of these so-called hard asset funds, same kind of story with the COMEX, right? They say we see metal coming off the COMEX, and they say, oh, there's bars in the vault, but how many claims are there on each bar in the vault? How many different owners? How many paper claims do those big bullion banks actually have for each bar that they have tagged in their vault? And they tried to make it sound like, oh, that London is just swimming in ounces of silver, and all the ETFs have to do is click a button, and all these stacks of gold bars can be summoned into their vaults, right, to satisfy this ETF demand that we've had in the last month or so for silver. Well, that's all FUBAR, right? I mean, that it's not. That's not really the case. You go and look at Ronan Manley's work, and they say, well, most of the silver in London is already accounted for before you even get into the weeds. We know exactly who owns most of it. And then if we get into the weeds of there's all these shares outstanding, there's all of these accounts, when more money flows into them, where are they getting the silver, right? So silver represents an asset that is a small market. It's a monetary commodity, and it has the most potential to run up quickly in a short period of time and actually affect industry, right? Because if you get a massive run up in silver, that's going to have reverberations through the actual physical economy, because your electronics, your solar panels, your battery technology, your medical field development, your biotechs, a lot of these new electronic devices are very reliant on silver. And those are the things that are supposedly going to drag us into this new era, right? The era of free energy or clean energy, of electric vehicles, of reduced use of fossil fuels. So if you get this massive spike in the price of silver because we've realized there's not enough actual supply for all the demand there is on the market, you're going to have a real impact on the economy versus the price of a Bitcoin going from 50,000 to 70,000. It's like, yeah, you made some profits, but unless you actually realize those profits and pull them back out and do something with them in the real economy with them, have you really affected anything? You're basically in a side bet casino, counting gains that are still on the table, right? Until you sell those Bitcoins and do something with them, you're not really affecting the overall economy. So my suggestion would be, hey, crypto guys, set aside a portion, decide what's best for you. Of course, I'm not your financial advisor, and financial advisors don't know shit about cryptos anyway, right? I mean, who's certified to give advice about cryptocurrencies on a FinReg environment, right? Nobody. So if this resonates with you, this gets you to where you want to be anyway, faster, by dividing up your crypto portfolio and investing a portion of the gains that you've realized and put them into silver, which is the Achilles heel of the system. And when the system goes down due to this rise in the price of silver and failure to deliver of commodities and mad scramble for silver in the industrial sector and the investing sector, you're going to see the loss of faith in the US dollar go mainstream, right? All of these policymakers, the mainstream media and the policymakers who have been putting on a happy face and smiling and telling you, oh, it's all COVID's fault, and these are temporary measures and we're going to get back to normal eventually, but we're going to be really accommodative for now. Yeah, that's not going to work when there's supply shortages of electronics and key commodities, right? When there's this run on commodities, they can't ignore it because it's in your face, it's in your daily life, right? Whereas, if some crypto goes up and down in price, most people don't care. It's the honest truth, right? Unless it hits them in the pocketbook when they go out to eat, when they go to the grocery store, when they go into Best Buy, when they're actually doing work for their business and trying to get a plumber or an electrician or something like that over. Unless it weeds its way into the real economy, you're just sitting on the sidelines. So that's what I would say. If you want to get to the place where cryptos are the dominant force and we have a world where cryptos are the oil of the means of exchange for hard assets, and that sort of honesty in exchange is a system that goes on, you can't just stay in cryptos. You have to deploy the funds that you're getting from the gains in cryptos into areas of weakness in the existing system to help cast it aside so that there's fresh ground for this new crypto system, based in hard assets also, to move in and take over the territory. If you're just going to wait, there's no guarantee that you survive that conflict. If you just sit on the sidelines the whole time, the regulators may come after you. The regulators may have enough legitimacy in the name of a lethargic public to move in and take out your positions. They're already talking about it. And yeah, it might be hard for them to do. And maybe you can go underground or you can jump jurisdictions with your stuff, but it's not a good strategy, right? When you see a weakness and there's a path forward there in the silver market, that's where you need to strike. And in the long run, you're going to make more money because you've had this run up in cryptos. You're going to go from, a potentially an asset that's had a really high run up over a period of years into one that is artificially suppressed by the system. And so whatever silver you can pull off the market, you're going to see tremendous upside in that as well. So you're just going to, double up in your profits. At least that's how I see it going down. So, tell me what you think in the comments. Let me know where you think I'm wrong. Do you want to just sit around and wait for the demise of the US dollar and hope that cryptocurrencies and hard assets and decentralization and these sort of ideas center themselves? Or is it a good idea to do like I suggest and actively position in these key commodities in order to hasten the downfall of these corrupt governments and get them out of the way quicker so that they can do less damage to cryptos and hard asset people alike? Tell me what you think in the comments. If this worked for you, hey, send me a subscription. I'm trying to get to 1,000 because if I get to 1,000, I can monetize my channel. I really appreciate it, guys. This has been Silver Busters. I hope wherever you're at, whatever time you're at, you're having a good day, and I will check you out later.